All right, so tonight's a new one. I've never done this one. I know I haven't because what it took to put it together was there was quite a bit to it. So, vitamin mineral supplement, yes or no? I want to take some time and explain why I recommend everyone take a basic quality multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement. As most of you are aware, probably everyone watching this right now is aware, NFL number 8 of the NFL 15 nutrition guidelines, NFL number 8 says I consumed a multivitamin mineral supplement. And in case you don't know, just so you get it right out of the way right up front, I don't sell any supplements at all. I get no kickbacks or mafia payoffs for any of my recommendations. What I do recommend, so why do I recommend a multi, and what prompted this lesson? What prompted this lesson was the 750th social media meme I saw like this one over the past, who knows, year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. But it's probably number 750, and the meme was this: the truth. You don't need supplements. Simple as that. And you know, a phrase I've played in my head over the past year and a half is certainty 2020. Certainty 2020. It's where people without real credentials, without real expertise, without nuance, without the inclusion of nuance, I should say, without variable conditions, they state things not as their opinion, not as their belief, but as certain. The confidence, the arrogance that people have over areas they truly have no experience in is staggering to me. Maybe the exaggerated confidence and arrogance hasn't really changed. Maybe I've just noticed it more in the past year and a half, or maybe it is something newer. I don't know. But boy, oh boy, are people confident in what they flap their gums about these days. So, as a counter to this whole certainty 2020, that's just a phrase that I came up with, and it just came into my head last year. It's just how it feels, how it felt, how it still feels. Not that I have certainty. I'm the opposite of that about kind of the world events going on. But as a counter to this certainty 2020, and as a reflection of what I have found myself saying multiple times weekly, especially in the last 18 months, I had a shirt printed last year. I'm wearing it. It says, as you can see, I don't know, we'll see. And it's just like that. I don't know, we'll see. Why? Why do I have the shirt printed? Why the phrase? Well, there are only a few things that I'm certain of. More times than not, what I have found is the more appropriate position, the one that puts humility over ego, that acknowledges that I might not understand the entirety of whatever the subject is. I might not. That I'm an expert in things that I don't need more than 5 fingers on one hand to count, where I would say that I'm an expert in that area. I might not even need 5 fingers. That I don't have a crystal ball to perfectly predict the future. To me, the phrase that I said, the phrase that popped into my head, I said it out loud to friends and family and whatnot on a number of topics over the last year and a half especially, where I am not an expert, is I said, I don't know, we'll see. What's going on right now? What's going on? Just pick your topic. What do you want? Government shutdown? You want COVID? What do you want? Just pick the topic. And I'm going to go, I don't know, we'll see. And it's not defeatist, it's not even like just negative and oppressive. It's not that. It's just, for me, it just hits as the opposite of this whole certainty 2020, which I seem to feel like there's just so much of. Pick almost any topic. To me, and the most honest answer, other than few we are really experts in. Okay, if you want to ask me about health coach related things, okay, I can answer a number of those topics as an expert. But other than some of the just a few things, which is probably true for most of us, where we would consider ourselves experts, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, let's go back to the slides. Get back to this. So anyway, that's why I'm wearing the shirt. But anyway, this person, certainty 2020. The truth, not a truth, the truth. You don't need supplements. Simple as that. Simple as that. All right. So this Certainty 2020 influencer, who by the way has hundreds of thousands of followers, of course he does, and who knows for a fact, he knows for a fact beyond all doubt that you don't need supplements. Simple as that. Got it. But I actually don't got it, because like pretty much everything, it's nuanced, and there's significant evidence that supports the opposite of Certainty 2020 here. So remember, my NFL number 8 says I consumed a multivitamin mineral supplement. Well, Certainty 2020 says it's entirely unneeded, period. So let me briefly discuss nutrients, most specifically vitamins and minerals, the micronutrients, and you decide when I'm all done if Certainty 2020 is more right or if my NFL number 8 is more right, okay? So first, what are nutrients? Nutrients are the chemical compounds and elements contained in foods that can be used to support growth, maintenance, vital body processes, and to provide energy. There's 7 classes of nutrients. They are carbohydrates, fats, proteins. These are macronutrients. Fiber, water, and then there's vitamins and minerals, and the vitamins and minerals are micronutrients. So 3 of the 7 classes of nutrients are the macronutrients. That's your carbs, fats, and proteins. And macronutrients are nutrients that provide calories or energy and are required in large amounts to maintain body functions and carry out the activities of daily life. Fiber, water, vitamins, and minerals are also necessary for health and energy. However, they contain no calories. Vitamins and minerals are micronutrients, as it says and as I said. Now, micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, are needed by the body in very small amounts. However, their impact on a body's health is critical, and deficiency in any of them can cause severe and even life-threatening conditions. They perform a range of functions, including enabling the body to produce enzymes, hormones, and other substances needed for normal growth and development. Very low dietary intake of a vitamin or nutritionally essential mineral can result in deficiency disease, termed micronutrient deficiency. That term deficiency will be key in a moment. So to name just a handful of micronutrient deficiencies and their corresponding diseases, we'll go with vitamin A. If there's the deficiency, you could end up with night blindness. Vitamin B1 or thiamine, you could end up with beriberi, and that impacts the heart and circulatory system. Severe cases can cause heart failure. Vitamin B3, which is niacin, is a systemic disease with diarrhea, dermatitis, dementia, or death. Vitamin C deficiency is scurvy. A lot of us have heard of that. And with scurvy, you get weakness, anemia, gum disease, skin problems, and at late stages, it can be life-threatening. Vitamin D, you get rickets, which is a softening and weakening of bones. A calcium deficiency, you can have hypocalcemia. You end up with osteopenia, or the more advanced osteoporosis, you could. For iron deficiency, it's anemia, and you have too little hemoglobin, resulting in too little oxygen that becomes available to tissues. For magnesium deficiency, you end up with fatigue, muscle spasms, weakness, stiffness, loss of appetite, and nausea. With zinc deficiency, you can have delayed wound healing, impaired appetite, diarrhea, and if it's chronic, severe, and untreated, it can be fatal. These are just a few. This is just truly a smattering of some of the micronutrients and the corresponding deficiencies. There are dozens, okay? Most outright deficiencies that reach disease level affect less industrialized, poorer nations, referred to as the developing world, okay? So for most of you listening to this, you're from the United States, but anybody listening to this, at least with me live, I know you're from not a developing world, but an industrialized, developed world. So let me make sure that you understand that difference, okay? Most deficiencies happen to people in the poorer nations that are less industrialized. They're in the developing world. Most, like I said, most times it's not going to happen in the United States, Canada, New Zealand, UK, the common places where people are listening to me right now. However, true deficiencies aren't entirely absent in industrialized nations. So it isn't that there's zero deficiencies in our developed industrialized nations. There are and can be some. So if we don't have loads of people in developed countries walking around with scurvy and rickets, are we good to go? Well, before we reach that true deficiency, we can and do have more commonly micronutrient inadequacies. And that's why I've got that at the top. Deficiency versus inadequacy. Important terms, important distinction. An inadequacy is defined as a nutrient intake less than the estimated average requirement, EAR. Estimated average requirement. Less than that. What's the EAR? The EAR is the average daily nutrient intake level estimated to meet the requirement of half the healthy individuals in a particular life stage and gender group. So the EAR is not a high level. The EAR, I'll say it again, is the daily nutrient intake level estimated to meet the requirement of half the healthy individuals in a particular life stage and gender group. Okay? So if you have an inadequacy, you're not meeting that. You're not meeting the EAR. So compared to deficiencies, which are rare in developed countries, micronutrient inadequacies are common. So in contrast to micronutrient deficiencies that result in clinically overt symptoms, like they're going to show up with problems if they've got a true deficiency and it's been chronic and ongoing. A clinician is going to figure it out. Okay, they're just going to be able to, because it's going to be more severe. Micronutrient inadequacies may cause covert symptoms. They're going to be a little harder to find. They're going to be more covert, undercover, secretive, harder to uncover. And they could be difficult to detect clinically, these micronutrient inadequacies. For example, micronutrient inadequacies could elicit symptoms of general fatigue. Geez, what could be causing that? A million things, right? Reduced ability to fight infections. Why is the person having a harder time fighting infections? Let's dig. Impaired cognitive function. Holy crap, what could affect cognitive function? And things like attention, concentration and focus, memory, mood. Holy crap, the number of things that could impact that, right? Micronutrient inadequacies may also have important implications, though, for long-term health and increase one's risk for chronic diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and age-related eye disease. Okay? So I want to make that distinction between deficiency versus inadequacy. We don't have to be deficient to be suboptimal on our micronutrient intake. If we're inadequate on micronutrients, it can also be very problematic to very serious. So if you're following me, then you're seeing that we don't need to reach that. As I said, deficiency, we don't have to be deficient and have the most serious problems for there to be an issue. But are we, Americans and others in industrialized nations, so the richer, more industrialized, developed nations like the United States and the other countries that I mentioned, lots of countries, is there common inadequate micronutrient states, in these nations? Inadequate micronutrient status? The answer is yes. Many Americans are not reaching micronutrient intake requirements from food alone, presumably due to eating an energy-rich, nutrient-poor diet. About 75% of the U.S. population do not consume the recommended intake of fruit, and more than 80% do not consume the recommended intake of vegetables. This was out of a research report that came out of Oregon State University, as it shows on the slide there, titled Micronutrient Inadequacies in the U.S. Population, an Overview. It's nicely done. So what amounts with respect to micronutrients will meet the needs of healthy populations? Okay, let me talk about that. Then I'm going to come back to some other research that I think kind of puts the final point on this potential issue of, are we running into micronutrient inadequacies? So I first need to share with you what the dietary reference intakes are. Okay, so if we're looking at, well, how do we know how much we're supposed to get, right? If we were looking at that, and how does anybody know? It's really not so much like any of us is going to look and go like, okay, I know from all the food and drink that I consume and the supplements I take, if I take any, I know I'm getting this exact amount of vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, and so on and so on and so on. It's likely we're not going to do that, okay? But I at least want you to know that there are references to go by. It wasn't made up in someone's garage, It wasn't someone, quote unquote, doing their own research. It is incredibly researched, and that doesn't mean it's perfect. And so I want to share with you where we get the standards, the references for telling us how much of the micronutrients we should get. So the first one I want to share with you is what's called the dietary reference intakes, the DRIs. The DRIs are developed and published by the Institute of Medicine. The DRIs represent the most current scientific knowledge on nutrient needs of healthy populations. The DRI is a generic term for a set of nutrient values, nutrient reference values that is, that includes these four things you see on the screen: the recommended dietary allowance, RDA, adequate intake, AI, tolerable upper intake level, UL, and the estimated average requirement, which I actually just mentioned a little bit ago. Remember, you're at an inadequate micronutrient status if you are not meeting the EAR of that micronutrient. And as you can see, the RDA, the AI, the UL, and the EAR, those four things are what make up the dietary reference intakes values. Okay? So who cares? Whatever, right? What does it mean? What does the DRI really tell us? Well, in the end, the DRI represents the lowest continuing intake level of a nutrient that is sufficient to meet the nutrient requirement of 97 to 98% of healthy individuals. So let me go up to the slide up there. Remember earlier I said the EAR was the estimated average requirement of a nutrient that would satisfy 50% of the people in the gender, age, life stage, so on and so on. So the EAR level is going to meet 50% of the people, whereas the DRI, by using the four nutrient reference values, comes out with a nutrient requirement to meet 97 to 98% of healthy individuals. Okay, so we're really starting to get it pretty close to what most people are going to need. Nothing's perfect for everyone, but for most people, the DRI is going to get us pretty close most of the time, unless there are extenuating circumstances, so on and so on. I said a minute ago, because I want you to have this background of, again, it's not someone doing their own research, or just some hack that sells supplements coming up with this, or some whatever, okay, as is so common in our today's social media and other outlets. It's not what's going on here. I said a minute ago the DRIs are published by the Institute of Medicine, so we should know who that is. The Institute of Medicine is an independent, nonprofit organization that works outside of government to provide unbiased and authoritative advice to decision makers and the public. Established in 1970, the IOM is the health arm of the National Academy of Sciences, which was chartered under President Abraham Lincoln in 1863. Okay, so we've got the DRIs, which are part of the Institute of Medicine. All the values there are trying to come up with values that will meet the needs of 97 to 98% of people. What other guidelines do we have? What other sources do we have to kind of go by for how much are we supposed to be getting in? Well, we have, in addition to the DRIs as a resource to determine that baseline intake of micronutrients for health populations, we have the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the DGA. Dietary Guidelines for Americans. The DGA is the cornerstone for federal nutrition programs and a go-to resource for health professionals nationwide. The DGA provides food-based recommendations to promote health, help prevent diet-related chronic diseases, and meet nutrient needs. The DGA was first released in 1980. In 1990, Congress passed the National Nutrition Monitoring and Related Research Act, which mandated that the DGA be published jointly by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Health and Human Services every 5 years. The latest edition of the DGA is the 2020 to 2025 edition. There's so much in this thing. This thing's hundreds of pages. What I want you to know is, first of all, that it exists, that it is a massive resource for anybody involved in nutrition nationwide and worldwide, really, because a lot of countries look for the dietary guidelines that we put out as not that they should go by it, but they'll use it as an additional reference or resource for what their country puts out as well. So it's really looked at Generally highly regarded, not uniformly, never anything 100%, but generally highly regarded. And within the latest DGA, they state there are underconsumed nutrients. They say current inadequate intake of nutrient-dense foods and beverages across food groups has resulted in underconsumption of vitamins A, C, D, E, choline, calcium, iron for certain age and gender groups, magnesium, potassium, and fiber. Again, that comes out of the Dietary, the DGA, Dietary Guidelines for Americans. And they say in there, and there are nutrients of public health concern. They say vitamin D, calcium, iron, potassium, and fiber are considered dietary components of public health concern for the general U.S. population because low intakes are associated with a risk for the development of chronic disease. They also state, this is a quote, in some cases, fortified foods and dietary supplements may be useful in providing one or more nutrients that otherwise may be consumed in less than recommended amounts. So beyond the DGA, I did share with you one. I actually put it out of order. I should have included it next. But anyway, you've already seen one from that Oregon State University, a research paper they published, a review, I should say, research review. But there are a number of published studies which indicate a variety of micronutrient inadequacies. So you've got the DGA recognizing, right, that there are nutrients of public health concern and there are underconsumed nutrients. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans is recognizing this in their publication. Beyond that, there's published research, published studies, lots of them, which indicate a variety of micronutrient inadequacies. In this paper, titled Multivitamins and Nutritional Adequacy in Middle-Aged to Older Americans by Obesity Status, the authors said, one of the things they said, I've highlighted here, a substantial proportion of U.S. adults, greater than 40%, have inadequate intakes of vitamin A, C, D, E, calcium, and magnesium. Compared to normal weight adults, obese individuals have been shown to have about 5 to 12% lower intakes of micronutrients and a higher prevalence of nutrient inadequacy. So obese individuals have lower intakes of micronutrients and a higher prevalence of nutrient inadequacy. That might run counterintuitive, but not so much when you consider that a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, chronically obese individuals are consuming ultra-processed frankenfood, which is very calorically dense, very nutrient deficient. Another study, this 2021 piece from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition said, the present study suggests that a significant number of Canadian adults may not be meeting recommendations for a number of essential nutrients, in other words, vitamin A, C, vitamin D, magnesium, calcium, and potentially potassium, as well as for some B vitamins in certain age sex groups. Before any American snubs their nose at this because it's a Canadian study, we go back and forth, ladies and gentlemen. Americans look at Canadian studies, Canadians look at American studies. We look at Australian studies, we look at UK studies, we look at other European studies. There are lots of good studies, lots of good research being done all over. There's not a great difference. There's not a great difference in how poor the dietary intakes are of Canadians versus Americans versus Europeans versus Australians versus you name it. Okay? There's not a great difference. So the study, just in case you were an American and went, it's not American, it still applies. As it relates to the critical nature of having a strong immune system, especially now, right, or at any time, even when we're not in a pandemic, it's always important to have a strong immune system. This 2020 piece published in Nutrients said, a well-functioning immune system is essential for human health and well-being. Micronutrients such as vitamins A, C, D, E, and zinc have several functions throughout the immune system, yet inadequate nutrient intakes are pervasive in the U.S. population. A large body of research shows that nutrient inadequacies can impair immune function and weaken the immune system. Overall, the prevalence of inadequacy, the percent of population below estimated average requirement, there's that EAR again. Overall, the prevalence of inadequacy in 4 out of 5 key immune nutrients is substantial. Specifically, 45% of the U.S. population had a prevalence of inadequacy for vitamin A, 46% for vitamin C, 95% for vitamin D, 84% for vitamin E, 15% for zinc. So on and so on. Okay? In this, let's see. So in this 2020 study that looked at obese older adults and their micronutrient status, although the obese consume, as I said before, it's another study. Although the obese consume more overall calories than healthy weight counterparts, they are just as or even more likely to have micronutrient deficiencies. The poor overall quality of the dietary intake with far too much ultra-processed frankenfood actually reduces the nutrient density of their overall intake. Their summary finding that I highlighted here says, in summary, our findings are consistent with previous reports that demonstrate that many U.S. adults have inadequate intakes of potassium, magnesium, calcium, vitamin D, and/or vitamin C, even with the use of dietary supplements, and that those living with food insecurity have a higher prevalence of micronutrient risk than those not living with food insecurity. This particular study, I had said that it was about looking at the older obese adults, not this one. I referenced the wrong study. This particular study, which I thought was interesting, was they were looking specifically at just kind of micronutrient adequacy or inadequacy, and then they also looked at what was the difference if someone lived in a food insecure environment, whether that be because of money, whether that be because they live in a food desert, short on grocery stores, short on real food, so on and so on and so on. And of course, not surprisingly, we might automatically assume, and we would assume, right, that people who are poor and or who live in food deserts have lower micronutrient intake and higher micronutrient inadequacies because their food supply is of poorer quality. Anyway, again, micronutrient inadequacies, and then also it's heightened if we're in an insecure food status. This is the one on older adults with obesity that have higher risk of some micronutrient inadequacies and so on and so on. Basically, I won't read all this because I kind of already did. It almost doesn't matter whether you're older, although one of the points these authors make is, so let me say there's 2 points here. One is the chronically obese typically have, again, increased intake of ultra-processed frankenfood, lower nutrients overall, higher calories. All right? I don't care what age you are. That's typically the case. But one of the things they pointed out here is older adults who undergo age-associated changes in appetite, absorption. Older adults don't necessarily absorb nutrients as well. Their appetite can change. Metabolism will change. That can impact different patterns of nutrient inadequacy compared with younger people. Several regional studies in the U.S. have found that a substantial proportion of older adults, predominantly overweight or obese, are at nutrition risk, raising awareness of the importance of identifying nutrition risks in overweight or obese older adults. You know what? When it's all said and done, we can get everything we need. Every macronutrient, carbs, fats, proteins, fiber, water, every micronutrient, vitamins and minerals, from food. We can get it all from food. The problem is, as a whole, we don't. In stark contrast to around 1900 or before, people today eat far too little real food, far too much ultra-processed frankenfood. The reasons are complex and varied. You've heard me talk about it. I'll continue to talk about it in all the lessons and everything I put out, everything I have and everything I will. But whatever the reasons, ultra-processed frankenfood is calorically dense and nutrient sparse. It's got lots of calories and too little nutrient density. Your gender, stage of life, climate, health status, physical activity status, and more can all play parts in determining what supplements you may or may not need. So do I recommend a quality, reputable, whole food-based multivitamin mineral? Yes, I do. Do I take one? Absolutely. The goal, the way I see it, is to use a supplement to just close the gap between what you get from whole foods and what you need for optimal health and performance. However, it's also, I'm always going to say this, still smart to talk with your primary care physician if you have any health condition whatsoever, so that anything specific to you can be addressed, whether you need less of something, more of something, or you need to omit something, whatever it may be. One size does not fit all. Okay? If you've got a health condition, you're dealing with something, you have an illness, a sickness, you're taking meds for something, you should talk to your physician and see what the scoop is and see if there's anything special you need or shouldn't have. Do I generally recommend the quality multi because I know it'll decrease our cardiovascular disease risk and or cancer and or improve longevity? No. The reason I say it that way is because some people crap all over the whole notion of supplements at all, a multivitamin supplement. As the one Certainty 2020 influencer said, we absolutely don't, period, end of statement. There isn't great research, okay, supporting that dietary supplements of a multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement reduces cardiovascular disease risk or cancer or improves longevity. There's not great research to support that. Okay, so do I recommend the multi because of those things? Because I think it's for sure going to improve cardiovascular disease risk, cancer risk, or improve longevity? No. It's because the evidence overall, which I've shared with you some tonight, supports the notion that maintaining adequate, non-excessive, ideally optimal intakes of micronutrients is vital to every aspect of health, fitness, vitality, and longevity. And number two, while we can get everything we need from foods, there are substantiated food and beverage shortfalls of key micronutrients. Number three, I'm not a fan, why a multivitamin, multimineral? I'm not a fan of singular vitamin or mineral attacks. I'm not going to try and figure out exactly which micronutrient I may be short on beyond reasonable blood work evaluations. And most people don't even do that. You might do an individual, a certain kind of a calcium supplement or something, because a lot of times if you're going to take a calcium supplement, they are very bulky, they take up a lot of space, and the amount of calcium you may need probably won't fit in a standard multivitamin, multimineral. But with few exceptions, I'm not a fan of the singular vitamin or mineral. Yeah, I take vitamin B1. That's it? I mean, that's it? Yeah, why? Well, the reasons always suck, by the way. And always is an exaggeration, but boy, I don't know, 98% of the time, the justification or the rationale, I should say, for why someone is using a singular vitamin or a singular mineral, again, with the exceptions of calcium and a few others, don't get me wrong, the reasoning is not good, it's not evidence-based, and they're cherry picking because they heard something, read something, or whatever. I don't do that. I'm not a fan of the singular attack. Broad-based, multivitamin, multimineral, more general, more wide-sweeping. And number four, I'd rather err on the side overall. Why take one at all? I'd rather err on the side while not exceeding. I don't want to exceed evidence-based recommendations. I'd rather err on the side of my body eliminating any excess, any little bit of excess, than being chronically inadequate. If I eliminate a little bit of excess, I'd rather have that than be chronically inadequate. So, with that being said, I need to at least speak for a moment about megadosing or any notion that if one is good, two is better. That's not good. It's not true. Nearly 500 years ago, Swiss physician and chemist Paracelsus expressed the basic principle of toxicology. Quote, all things are poison and nothing is without poison. Only the dose makes a thing, not a poison, not a poison. Unquote. This is often condensed to the dose makes the poison. In other words, any chemical, even water and oxygen, can be toxic if too much is ingested or absorbed into the body. The toxicity of a specific substance depends on a variety of factors, including how much of the substance a person is exposed to, how they are exposed to it, and for how long. Any micronutrient can be fatal if enough of it for long enough is consumed. All micronutrients aren't created equal on this front either. The fat-soluble vitamins, I want to have you just kind of at least, there's lots of things to point out, but I want to have you at least know about the fat-soluble vitamins, which ones they are, A, D, E, and K. They can be stored in the body. They're fat-soluble. They can be stored in fatty tissue in the body. Whereas the water-soluble vitamins, vitamin C and the B complexes, are relatively non-toxic even at high doses. As too many now believe they've earned their medical degree from Facebook, Google, or YouTube, knowing with 2020 certainty they are going to ward off COVID by supplementing with vitamin D and zinc, it's important not to exceed dietary reference intakes or of those, or any of the recommendations of those specifically given to you by your physician. The FTC has gone after at least one company making unsubstantiated claims that supplementing with vitamins D and zinc can fend off or cure COVID better than vaccines. But honestly, good for them, but honestly, I see this as just urinating on a 5-alarm fire. There's so much social media misinformation out there, it's just beyond the pale. It is just mind-blowing. So, here's what I want you to do with regard to this. Stick with the science. Do your level best to follow NFL number 1, which is eat real food, right? At least 90% of the time if you're in maintenance, at least 95% of the time if you're in action. Eat real food. Try to stick with the science and eat real food. Talk with your medical provider about supplementing if you're being treated for any condition, any medical condition. Also, make sure you talk to your medical provider if you're having any surgical or medical procedure done. Sometimes they want you to stop, sometimes they want you to keep going with a multivitamin, okay? It can vary. And remember, the goal of supplementation is to close the gap, just close the gap between what we get from our food and beverages, our whole foods, and what we need for optimal health. I'm not a supporter in any way, shape, or form of excess or mega dosing without the knowledge and participation of a qualified licensed medical professional. Micronutrients are powerful catalysts, and when consumed at mega doses, they can become a pharmacological substance exerting drug-like actions. And drugs, as you well know, all have side effects. Micronutrients are no exception. Okay? That's my take on vitamin mineral supplements. So now it's up to you. I'm going to keep NFL number 8 because I do believe I'm standing on solid ground to generally recommend a multivitamin, multimineral for the majority of the population. If for no other reason, to make sure that we are closing that gap and without trying to figure out exactly which one we're trying to close, right? That's that whole, I'm just going to take B1, I'm just going to take B6. I don't recommend that. But hey, to each his or her own. But that's my recommendation. Hopefully this helps, and hopefully it helps answer why I don't agree with Certainty 2020 influencer who says under no circumstances is it necessary, period. You know, stop, right? Okay.